So we've been investigating in life science living things and those that are macroinvertebrates like that we see without a microscope. And then we have microorganisms that live in the water and live in the soil and on surfaces that are such as bacteria that are prokaryotic. They're single cellular and that they're very, very, very small. You need a microscope to see them. Uh, Even smaller than that is something that's non-living, that's in the news every single day now is viruses. And so viruses are going to be uh, are pretty fascinating because they are not living. They require a host in order to reproduce, and so they have DNA. So no nucleus, but they have DNA, and they're able to inject their DNA into living cells and then have them reproduce for them, and that's how it's spread. So in our reading, we had let's see, let's go to the reading. So in our reading, it was talking about different microorganisms. These are actually living things within a single drop of pond water, and you guys should have written where it says notebook, where there's a reading check, and then you click on notebook, and you're able to write in here about whatever the question may be. And the ones about viruses, it's pretty cool because this is exactly what's in the news right now. And so as we're talking about COVID-19 and coronavirus, and uh, we're talking about things that are in a that are so small. The largest virus is many times smaller than the smallest bacteria. We're talking about measuring in nanometers. And remember, I was talking about, like, you put your fingers together as close as you can, and that would be like a millimeter. And if you were to divide that up into 1,000 times, that would be a micrometer or a micrometer. That'd be like what you would measure bacteria in. And then if you were to split that same little space into 100,000 little slivers, now we're getting down to nanometers. And so when we're talking about viruses, we're talking about things that are very, very small. And they do require a host because they're non-living. They have DNA, and they're able to inject their DNA into living cells, and then the living cells start to replicate that DNA, and that's how they end up spreading. So they do come in these many shapes, and of course, as we know right now, the shape that is most prevalent is corona. It's a crown shaped. We'll see a picture of that in just a moment. And so as you're reading, you should see about the viruses, you should see that these different shapes, these bacterial shapes, I'm sorry, not bacterial shapes, but these virus shapes uh, play different roles. Like influenza is going to be another type of coronavirus. You have, let's go to this here. This one here is going to be a bacteriophage. And what's cool about the bacteriophage, I mean, first of all, it looks like pretty awesome. It's like a spaceship, but it is able to inject its DNA into the living cell. And you see these bacteriophages. Well, these bacteriophages can actually be used. They actually can be used in order to genetically modify DNA and then put that genetically modified DNA back into the living organism in order to change its appearance, change its behaviors. It could change. It could actually basically um, what's the word? Basically reprogram the living thing in order to, in a lot of cases, what we're looking at, in order to fight disease, in order to fight different diseases, and we were able to use that newly developed DNA, that genetically modified DNA, in order to fight disease and fight different conditions. This is a lot of new sciences that are out, biomedical engineering, where you can actually use this to fight diseases. And we use this bacteriophage as kind of a vehicle in order to transmit the new modified DNA into the cells that have been affected. And so one of the things that we can see here, there's different viruses. You have the coronavirus here of influenza. That's like the flu. There's about 7 different strands of flu that we deal with yearly, and this COVID-19 is it's a novel coronavirus. Here you can see the bacteriophage as well. Um, so with what's going on with COVID-19, the virus itself is highly transmittable. The reason it's so scary uh, is that it's not only is deadly. I mean, it's causing lots of people to suffer, but it's also how easy it is to transmit. For example, for regular virus, uh, there's about 1.3, 1.4 people for every person that has the flu. Then about 1.3, 1.4 people will then end up getting the flu from you if you have the flu. Well, over 10 generations, so that person gives it to another person that gives it to another person. After about 10, you end up with about 13 different people that get the flu virus from you. So one person over the course of 10 generations will affect 13 different people. Well, the COVID-19 has more of a transmission rate of about 2.5, 2.4, somewhere in there. Well, that doesn't seem like a whole lot. I mean, basically, you're talking about, well, it's just one more person, right? Well, if you go to 10 generations, now using that same math of, 2.5 times 2.5 times 2.5, over 10 generations, one person is actually transmitting that virus to now 59,000 or more people. That's where it gets scary. So basically, one person with COVID-19 can end up transmitting that to over 59,000 people. And so that's why we're doing what we were doing. That's why we're staying at home and practicing social distancing, washing our hands, trying our best not to touch our face, which is one of the hardest things for me to do. And so that's why we're taking such dramatic actions in order to to fight this virus, to basically to cut down on the spread of the virus. Also, with COVID-19, the virus itself is not actually um, what's making people sick. It's our immune response to that. So our immune system, it basically it sees that there's something wrong. There's a invader. There's a virus, and what it does is it responds to that. And one of the responses for COVID-19 has to do with the respiratory system. So in the respiratory system, your lungs and the bronchial tubes and the alveoli, those specialized cells become inflamed, and they as they become inflamed, now you're starting to have respiratory issues where you can't breathe because it's so inflamed. That's why we need the respirators and things. So some of the treatments that are being tried are to basically twofold. One is using medications such as malarial or antiviral medications like erythromycin, the Z-Pak, and then and malarium antiviral medications, in order to the combination of the two, in order to cut down on the viral spread. And then the other is those that are trying to give medication to stop the inflammation of the lungs and the respiratory system. If they can cut down on the inflammation, then they can be able to breathe, and now your body's able to create the antibodies and gives your body time to fight the viral infection. And so those are the two methods that are going on right now, from what I've read about COVID-19, and having some success with that. So we're gonna continue to follow that as we move forward. But the viruses are very small, and then you get to bacteria. The plural, the singular for bacteria is bacterium, and so multiple bacterium make up bacteria. So bacteria can be good and bad. We have there's 1-2 trillion cells in our body, and we have maybe upwards of 10 trillion or more, 10 to 20 trillion bacteria cells in our body. So are we more human or are we more bacteria? But these have this biome, this diversity of bacteria in our bodies that that helps us keeps us healthy. It actually is a benefit. So the majority of the bacteria are beneficial. There are bacteria that then can actually harm us. They can cause infection. We can get a sinus infection. We can get infections from other types of bacteria, and they are living, and we can actually address that bacterial infection with an antibiotic. So viruses don't. There's no antibiotic to kill viruses, but there are antibiotics that will kill bacteria. And it's super important that you actually, when you have a bacterial infection, that you take the antibiotics all the way through. I'm guilty of this as well. I'm not anymore, but I used to. Basically, you got a bacterial infection and you take the antibiotic and you feel better, you stop taking the medication. Well, why would I take medication if I'm feeling better, right? So the reason that you want to continue taking that antibiotic is because there's lots of bacteria that are actually they're resistant to the antibiotic. Well, if you stop taking the antibiotic, then the bacteria cells that are resistant to the antibiotic are now the ones that are going to reproduce. And now you're going to have a harder time getting rid of that bacterial infection, because you've left behind the ones that are resistant to the antibiotic, and you may have to change up to a different antibiotic or start all over or increase the dosage. And antibiotics are going to kill both the good and the bad bacteria. It's a lot of times why you take a probiotic, in order to encourage your good bacteria to reproduce and to live on, because we can actually do more harm by killing off the good bacteria than when we're trying to kill the bad bacteria. So take your medication, the antibiotic, through the full course as the doctors have prescribed, and so that you can avoid spreading that, because also you then spread that bacteria, and now you're spreading the resistant bacteria, and it continues, and we have a harder time getting rid of it. Other things that we in this chapter that I want you to kind of pay close attention to. One, there's ways that there's ways that we have there's ways that we have increased that bacteria on surfaces and things where it is important to wash your hands, whether in COVID during this time or not. It's important to wash your hands. There's some studies back and forth about whether or not we should be actually using hand sanitizer as much as we do at times, because it does kill off the good bacteria as well. And so we have bacteria, and then the Protists was one that we were looking at. You'd never want to drink any water that has whether it's a clean, pristine stream or the good water quality. That doesn't matter. There's going to be these organisms within called protists. They're multicellular, and protists can be plant-like, they can be animal-like, they can be fungi-like, and a lot of times they are parasitic, and that they can, amoebas and giardia that are in the water, and they can make you really sick. So you don't want to drink any water that's not, actual drinking water. Protists are another kingdom. So you have like the plant kingdom, the animal kingdom, Protista kingdom, and then like fungi. Fungi have a different type of reproduction that you read about, using spores. They also have this wide net of hypha that are like their root system. So they do need water, but they thrive in darker areas that are moist, but they don't photosynthesize, so they're not plants. So there's different types of molds and fungi that are a part of yeast and things like that. Athlete's foot. These are things that you can get a fungal infection, and you have to treat that with a fungicide. You can't treat that with an antibiotic. In fact, an antibiotic would make it worse. Um, those are some of the things that we were looking at in this last chapter about the differences between uh, viruses, bacteria, protists, and fungi. If you have any more questions about that, or if you're interested in more, uh, please reach out to me, email me. You're not bothering me. Please, if you have any trouble with the e-text or anything like that, let's get, as you can tell, I had trouble just now while I was in the e-text. There was a problem that came up. It's going to happen. There's so many people online right now trying to do these things. Be patient. We're all in this together. This is not the way that I wish that we were doing science. Science to me needs to be something that we do, not something that we just read about and write about. But we're going to do the best that we can with what we have, and remember, we're all in this together. And you guys stay safe, and I'll see you next time. There will be more help sessions along the way. We've had multiple help sessions. Those of you that have reached out to me, we can get online quickly, and I can help you as much as possible. Continue doing that. Don't fall behind. Please do not fall behind. Please communicate. Have your parents communicate with me if you don't feel comfortable. I don't care. Let's all let's get through this, and let's do the best we can with what we can. Okay. All right, guys. Miss you, and talk to you later.